Yeah, so I'm Nick Harne. I work for Hull City Council. I work in housing strategy and renewal. I was very fortunate that they gave me some time off to for this experience. And for those of you who have never heard of Hull, but might be only Fools and Horses fans, we were part of a feature in that. I thought maybe To Seville and Back could be the sequel or something like that, but we'll see. So basically, when I was asking for the time off work there, they asked me, what will you get from this experience? Why Leonardo? And I think the question's more than that. It's not just why Leonardo, but why should we take a step back from our busy lives in the UK, what have you, to immerse ourselves somewhere different and really sort of get to learn and understand another place. And I think the big thing for me were these four parts, but I'm going to focus because of the lack of time on numbers 3 and 4. But I think number 1 goes without saying. It's a cultural experience, learning a new language in a new place. There's also a lot of technical understanding and understanding the way that other systems work. And for me as a planner by trade, but also working in housing, it was really interesting to understand other systems. They're very regionally based, and basically the cities are given a lot of freedom to determine sort of their own futures, and that's something very interesting working in regeneration. But in terms of sort of my work in Adia, Jose is going to speak a little bit later about sort of what we did, but we very much started off, we looked at translations and immersed ourselves in the company. It helped with my Spanish, and it helped me sort of understand what the company really does. We worked on a housing project, looking at the business case and looking at some of the financing, master planning work, and looking at some car parks and hubs. But I'd say the most important thing I learned there was about different approaches, about how it's much less linear to what I was used to working. It's a much more collaborative approach early on. But what was really important out in Spain, and I think the recession has a lot to do with this, is that partnerships are critical, and that they'll do things just to develop ideas that might not go anywhere, but they try and make their own opportunities. And I'm really sorry, I've got the wrong presentation here without a picture. But basically, insert riverboat tour. I don't know how this has happened, but I don't have time to put the right one in. But basically, there's a beautiful river in Seville, and it's used for tourism a lot, but what they don't do is do transport a lot along it. We work with the Carousel Business School at risk just to see if we can develop any ideas for that, to get that moving. I'm really nervous now that I've sent a draft presentation through and all the rest of the slides are totally void, so hopefully we can supply some of the proper ones. Apply knowledge, this was meant to be in there. Now, it might not look like it's supposed to be, but we all know the game top trumps, and it's where you compare and contrast, see who's better than who else. Now, what better match than Kate and Will's, eh? And for me, Seville and my home city of Hull were actually very good matches, and there was a lot of applied learning that I could take from out in Seville and bring it back home. So in terms of a bit of a game of context, again, insert pictures, it's a real shame this, but never mind. In terms of context, they're both very flat cities. They've both suffered a lot from flooding issues. Seville's adapted, Hull's needing to adapt. Seville's needing to adapt to climate change. I think really critically, they're both very peripheral in the national context, but they're also centres of their local region. But for me, the fact that they're both inland ports, which isn't that common, but the inland port is the real driver of the economy. But what we're now starting to see is port industries turn more mechanised. There's high levels of unemployment, deprivation, and there's a need for the city to change and rebrand. And one thing that Seville's been very good at is rebranding itself, turning to tourism. And that's something Hull's sort of trying to chase up. I put there insert pictures of bridges because there's a river that severs both cities. And Seville's just ahead on that stake. It has 7 bridges to reconnect. Hull only has 6. But we are building one more, I promise you. Right. So I've switched it now. It's not Hull versus Seville anymore. It's Hull and Seville. So what's really critical is that the green economy and driving these two cities forward. That's something I've found as a real similarity. Hull is literally just about to announce investment from Siemens of around about 20 to 30 million in the city. It's going to be transformed by the offshore wind sector. Also, biofuels are very important in Hull, but it's the exact same in Seville, but with solar power. We were fortunate enough to go on a trip to Abengoa's solar farm, and they're very much using solar industry and renewables as the driver there. And I'm hoping that one's in. So how does that really connect us? And this is something I didn't know about until I got out there into Seville, and it's something that ADIA were very bought into and flagged up to us, that if you see the energy capacity across Europe is that we're going to become more interdependent on each other as time progresses. And as you see in the north, during the winter months, when the wind blows the hardest, we might actually be net exporters to the south. But in the same way, we've got a relationship with the south as in the summer when the wind's not quite as strong, but the solar energy has its biggest capacity, they'll be exporters to the north. Globalization's driving us closer together. And I don't know if there's a pointer on this, but as you can see on the network map in the North Sea, it nicely plonks Hull right in the middle of that. But Abengoa are exploring, and this is only Europe, is the capacity in the Sahara. I think around about 3% of the Sahara is enough to power the Mediterranean or something crazy like that. So we've got these two massive resources at either end, and I see Hull and Seville very much interlinked on that. Just want to go back to one more, sorry, because it wasn't in there. It's not just about the big, it's also about the small though, and some of the steps that we're taking towards that as cities. So the small in terms of transport, for example. Seville is an amazing cycling city. It's got a beautiful network of cycle lanes. Hull is also a very strong cycling city. I think we're about the 4th in the country. And then in terms of housing projects, for example, something that I'm more interested in and work closer with, but we've both got energy efficiency projects going on. Andalusia has the Jessica Fund for around about £50 million for energy efficiency improvements in houses. We're doing something similar in Hull using some of the emerging policy around Green Deal and some of the current stuff around the community energy savings projects. So I won't go to my conclusion slide because I don't think it's there. But basically, for me, the really key thing about this, it wasn't necessarily the project that we worked on out there, but it was this experience, and it was the fact that we could sort of apply our learning and what we were understanding in Seville and bring it back to our workplaces at home. And I think if anyone gets the opportunity, whether as an employer or whether as someone wanting to go on something like this, is that that's what you could really pitch forward as some of the benefits and the outcomes from it. Okay, thank you.